10 men cried out for mercy, 10 were cleansed, but only one came back. Welcome to the debate.
Yeah, it's a haunting reality, really. I mean, we're looking at this ancient record from Luke chapter 17, capturing this moment on the dusty borderlands between Samaria and Galilee.
Right, exactly. Jesus of Nazareth encounters 10 men suffering from leprosy. He heals all of them, yet only one returns to give thanks, which prompts this really striking question from Jesus. Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9?
And see, right there, I argue that the historical judgment of those 9 men has been, well, completely unbalanced. If we look strictly at the text, Jesus gave them a direct, explicit command. He said, "Go and show yourselves to the priests."
He did, yeah.
Right. So the 9 were acting in strict obedience, Their continuation down that road was a profound fulfillment of faith, not necessarily this act of callous ingratitude the people usually assume.
I hear that. And your defense of the 9 is a really strong technical reading. But my position is that Luke highlights this specific detail, the one returning, to show us that obedience, when it's disconnected from recognition, it's fundamentally incomplete.
Incomplete? How so?
Because the central conflict of this narrative isn't actually about physical healing. It's about spiritual illumination. The true miracle here isn't just that decaying flesh was restored. It's that one man recognized the ultimate source of his restoration and turned back. He realized that prioritizing the gift over the giver is a tragic misstep of human nature.
Okay, but to understand why they kept walking, we have to look at the socio-political and, honestly, the medical reality of the first century. You really cannot judge the 9 without understanding the role of the priesthood back then.
Fair point. The priests were heavily involved.
Exactly. In ancient Israel, the priest wasn't just a spiritual mediator. He was essentially the chief medical officer, right? The gatekeeper of society. According to the Levitical law, the strict public health codes governing that region, a priest was literally the only authority who could legally declare a person clean.
Yeah, you couldn't bypass them.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't go back to your farm, you couldn't enter the marketplace, and you certainly couldn't go home to your family without that official certification. Jesus told them to go get their lives back, and they simply did what he said.
They did, but framing it merely as bureaucratic obedience kind of ignores the absolute abyss these men were shouting across to get his attention in the first place. I mean, the text specifically points out they stood at a distance, calling out for mercy.
Which makes sense for a contagious disease.
It does, but we need to clarify what that distance really represents. A diagnosis of leprosy in the ancient world wasn't just a skin condition. It was a social, familial, and religious death sentence. It was a zero-tolerance policy.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Utterly brutal. If you were afflicted, you were required by law to tear your clothes, which is a sign of perpetual mourning for your own living death. You had to leave your head uncovered, and if anyone healthy approached, you were legally obligated to cover your mouth and scream, "Unclean, unclean."
Just to protect the healthy people from your own presence, right?
Exactly.
Which, is a harsh but necessary public health mechanism in an era before antibiotics. The camp had to be protected, but the psychological toll, that is exactly my point here. Overnight, a merchant or a father is just banished outside the city limits.
Reduced to nothing.
Right. He becomes a walking ghost who survives on scraps left by travelers. And what makes this particular group of 10 men so fascinating to me is their composition. We are explicitly told there is a Samaritan among them.
Yes, that's a crucial detail.
Given the geographical borderlands, the other 9 were almost certainly Jewish. And in any normal context, the cultural and religious walls between Jews and Samaritans were, they were insurmountable. They despised each other.
They really did. But shared trauma erased those boundaries. The isolation of this horrific disease basically forced ethnic enemies into a brotherhood of the excluded. Leprosy stripped them of all those societal labels.
Yeah, they weren't Jews or Samaritans anymore. They were just the dying.
Precisely. So when Jesus passes by, they don't even ask for a specific cure. They just cry out, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." It's this profound recognition of their total societal bankruptcy.
And this is where the mechanics of Jesus' response become highly challenging, I think. because in other narratives, Jesus physically touches lepers. He shatters that social barrier to offer immediate, tangible comfort. But here,
He doesn't touch them.
no, he doesn't touch them. He doesn't even heal them on the spot. He just issues an administrative order, go and show yourselves to the priests. We really have to pause and analyze the psychology of that command.
It's definitely a unique approach.
Right, because presenting yourself to the priest is the final step. It's the certification you receive after you are healed. But when Jesus speaks to them, their bodies are still sick. He is telling visibly diseased, highly contagious men to walk toward the highest religious authorities to get a certificate of health.
Which is exactly why this is such a profound mechanism of faith. He is demanding that they actively participate in their own restoration. They have to act as if the miracle has already happened while the physical evidence of their disease is still right there on their skin.
I mean, I see the poetry in that interpretation for sure. But let's examine the sheer psychological torment of that demand. If they walk to the priest and nothing happens, they aren't just disappointed.
No, it would be dangerous.
Extremely. They are exposing themselves to immense public shame, potential violence, and the ultimate mockery of the religious establishment. It borders on a cruel psychological test, honestly. They have to put one foot in front of the other toward the authorities while still feeling the agony in their limbs.
Well, I wouldn't call it cruelty. It is the friction required for faith to materialize. The text specifically notes that the healing happened as they went.
Right.
It occurred in the middle of the journey. The action had to precede the evidence. But the moment that evidence manifested, the moment the healthy skin returned, their divergent reactions exposed the core tension of Luke's narrative. 10 men were healed, 9 kept running toward the priests. Only 1 stopped, turned around, and came back.
And I will fiercely defend the 9 for continuing to run. I mean, imagine the mechanism of human survival instinct. Say you are trapped in a burning building. You're choking on smoke, certain you are about to die. A firefighter kicks down the door, pulls you from the flames, and drags you out to the street.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Your very first instinct, the moment your feet hit the pavement and you draw a breath of clean air, is not going to be sitting down to have a long philosophical conversation with the firefighter.
Probably not, no.
Right. Your mind is consumed by a singular, overwhelming drive, frantically searching for your spouse, hugging your kids, reclaiming the life that was violently stolen from you. The 9 likely experienced a massive rush of adrenaline and euphoria. They were rushing to the priest so they could go home.
Your defense of the 9 rests entirely on human survival instinct. And look, I grant you the psychology of that. It is deeply understandable. But Luke is pushing us past basic survival instinct to diagnose a deeper spiritual reality. We aren't analyzing a pure historical diary here. We are analyzing a theological text.
Sure, but they were still human beings.
Absolutely. And the 9 aren't villains. The text never says they lost their healing or were punished. But they do represent a tragic default of human nature. Human instinct, even understandable instinct, almost always prioritizes the gift over the giver.
But you're glossing over the fact that they were following his direct orders. Jesus told them to go to the priests. If you are given a direct command by a teacher you literally just called master, isn't obedience the highest form of respect?
It is a form of respect, yes.
They stayed within the boundaries of the expected religious system because that is exactly what the law and Jesus himself required of them in that moment.
They stayed within the boundaries of a transactional religious system. Yes, they had a problem, they followed the procedure, they got the result, and they went to finalize the paperwork. But framing their departure merely as commanded obedience ignores the fundamental shift in reality that occurred on that road.
What do you mean by shift in reality?
When the divine breaks into human history, standard procedure is rendered obsolete. The 9 viewed the healing through the lens of a transaction. The Samaritan viewed it through the lens of transformation.
Okay, so why does Luke make the identity of the Samaritan the hinge of this entire narrative?
Because of that socio-political reality you mentioned earlier. The Samaritan carried a double stigma. He wasn't just a leper, he was an ethnic and religious outcast. To understand his reaction, you really have to understand the centuries of hostility between Jerusalem and Samaria.
Right, the rival temples.
Exactly. The Samaritans had their own rival temple on Mount Gerizim, which the Jewish establishment viewed as deeply illegitimate. To the Orthodox leaders in Jerusalem, a Samaritan was a heretic. Even if he was completely healthy, the Jewish priests wouldn't have welcomed him into the inner courts of the temple anyway.
Wait, are you arguing that his return was simply born out of his exclusion? Like the 9 Jewish men had a temple system ready to welcome them back. But because the Samaritan knew the Jerusalem establishment would reject him regardless of his health, he just defaulted to raw gratitude.
Not quite.
Because that makes his return a matter of geographical and political convenience, not necessarily profound spiritual illumination. He just had nowhere else to go.
No, I am arguing that his absolute lack of a religious safety net is exactly what allowed him to see the truth clearly. His exclusion stripped away the illusion of entitlement.
Oh, I see.
If you believe you belong to the chosen system, and if you are one of the 9 Jewish men, a miracle might just feel like a correction of an administrative error. The universe writing itself. I am a good person who suffered unjustly, and now I have been healed, so I will go back to the temple where I belong. But the Samaritan had zero expectation of belonging. He was historically conditioned to expect nothing but rejection.
That is a critical psychological distinction. When you expect absolutely nothing and you receive everything, the magnitude of the grace is undeniable.
Precisely. True gratitude requires the complete abandonment of entitlement. The moment a person feels they are owed a healing, or, owed a financial breakthrough, or owed a happy life, they lose the capacity to be genuinely grateful when those things actually arrive.
Wow, yeah.
The Samaritan looked down at his restored hands and realized something the other 9 missed. He realized that the true temple, the true presence of the divine, wasn't waiting for him in a stone building in Jerusalem. It was standing right back there on the dusty road.
And the text says he returned praising God with a loud voice, and he threw himself face down at Jesus' feet, which in the cultural context of the ancient Near East, throwing yourself face down is not a casual thank you.
No, not at all.
It is an act of total surrender and absolute reverence, reserved exclusively for the divine. So he is recognizing that the firefighter who pulled him from the building is actually the architect of the universe.
Exactly. And this forces us to reckon with Jesus' response. He asks, "Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" That isn't the grievance of an egotistical leader demanding applause. It is a profound diagnosis of human tragedy.
Right.
He didn't just want to fix their decaying skin. He wanted to restore their souls. He wanted a relationship with them. But they settled for the physical benefit and just kept walking.
I understand the theological mirror Luke is holding up here, but I still want to introduce a point of caution to our discussion. We must acknowledge what the text leaves entirely silent.
Of course.
We don't know what happened at the 9 after they reached the priests. We really cannot claim with absolute certainty that they never felt gratitude or that they never spoke of Jesus again once they were reunited with their families. The narrative simply focuses on the immediate aftermath, that critical window of realization on the road.
And that textual silence is deliberate. Luke isn't writing a biography of all 10 men. He is isolating this specific moment to force the reader to examine their own momentum.
Which leads us to the ultimate takeaway of this ancient record. It's crucial to establish what this text is not. This isn't a formula for how to get a physical healing today. It's not a medical textbook.
Definitely not.
If it were a formula, it would imply that if we just shout the right words with the right amount of faith from the right distance, all our physical ailments will vanish. That is a dangerous manipulation of the narrative, and it ignores the brutal reality of human suffering. The text does not promise that every physical disease will be cured.
Far from it. Luke is using this event to diagnose a condition much deeper than leprosy. He's suggesting that humanity is, far too easily satisfied. We pray desperately when we are sick, when we are facing financial ruin, when our families are falling apart, and when the relief comes, the natural human default is to breathe a sigh of relief and immediately rush back into the momentum of normal life.
Yeah, the crisis is over, so the crying out stops.
Exactly.
It's the tragedy of the answered prayer. Once you have what you begged for, the desperation that drove you to your knees evaporates. When the fever breaks, or the check clears, or the conflict ends, our immediate trajectory is to consume the benefit. We take the life preserver and completely ignore the one holding the rope.
And it is fascinating that Jesus highlights this by specifically calling attention to the Samaritan status as a foreigner. It's a challenge to religious assumptions in any era. Luke is making the subversive point that the people who are supposed to know the most about God, the insiders, the orthodox, the ones with the right theology, are often the quickest to take his mercy for granted.
Yeah.
It is the outsider, the marginalized, the one who knows they are completely destitute, who actually understands the weight of grace.
10 men were pulled from the burning building. 10 men were handed back their futures. They all took the brave step of walking forward before the evidence arrived. They all experienced the stunning, undeniable reality of a restored body. The sentence of death was lifted for every single one of them.
But only one realized that the restored future wasn't the ultimate prize. The rescuer was. And so the question that echoes from that dusty road isn't just about what happened 2 millennia ago. It's a question that reaches every listener today. Luke's story is powerful not because it gives a formula for healing, but because it reveals a question that reaches every listener. After receiving mercy, do we keep walking away to rush back to our normal lives, or do we return in gratitude,